Okay. Okay, good morning, everybody. Today we're gonna talk about the transaction checklist. So what this checklist is it's a list of all the different forms or contracts or disclosures or reports you're gonna need for a transaction. We have the checklist available on SkySlope, so when you're in a transaction, and we'll talk about SkySlope at the end here. When you're in a transaction, you're required to give the brokerage us a copy of all the fully executed documents throughout the transaction. And this is the list of what you're gonna need for the transaction. But when you're newer to the industry or new to the industry, when you see this checklist, you're overwhelmed by, all the different forms that you're gonna need for the transaction. Like when I look at this, I'm thinking, where do I get all this from, right? So the purpose of this class is to let you know, just to make it easier for you, where you're gonna obtain these documents from. Some they're all gonna be from zip forms, most of them, right? Some are gonna come from escrow, different places. But I'm separating this into who's gonna provide it? Are you gonna get it from the listing side? Are you gonna get it from the buyer side? And then we have escrow, there's some documents you're gonna get from escrow. So if you're representing the buyer, and you're missing some documents that the listing side is supposed to provide, you'll know because we're gonna check mark list side. So if you're going through your checklist and you have most of your documents there and you notice that you're missing one, you know who to contact to get that document. Does that make sense? Okay, so for the listing checklist, this is pretty much it. You're gonna need the listing agreement. We might update this, and the listing agreement is pretty much, it's just an agreement to list the property, right? I don't have a copy of that up here, but it's just a listing agreement and it's a packet of forms. And the other form on the checklist is a seller instructions to exclude the listing from the MLS, which I believe we're not using anymore because there's a form within the listing agreement that has all that language, that verbiage. So like if, say you want to, they're signing the contract today and the beginning date of that contract, the listing is today, but they don't want you to put it into the MLS until next week. So then you would enter that next week's date as begin marketing on this date. And that's what that form is. But again, that's included now into the listing agreement packet. So I think at some point we're gonna get rid of this from the checklist. So-
Are you talking about listing this?
No, this is just the listing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, this is not what you guys have in front of you now. This is for when you get a listing. There's a checklist for that, even though it's just one form. So when you enter this into SkySlope, and I'll show you later. If you have the listing, you have to start with entering the listing into SkySlope, so we have a copy of that. And then once you get an offer accepted, you open escrow, then that listing you're gonna convert into a transaction in SkySlope within the system. Because now it's not a listing anymore. Now you're in escrow and it's a transaction where there's multiple parties involved. And we'll talk about the difference a little bit later, but yes.
So with the residential agreement, and there's like more forms, is there a list of those forms that you're supposed to, that come with that?
No, but it's in the packet already.
Okay,
So when you pull up the listing contract,
yeah,
listing agreement in zip forms, it's gonna have all those forms.
Automatically?
Automatically.
so don't worry that anything's
No.
missing? Okay.
So the checklist you have in front of you now is the checklist for a transaction. And if you notice here, I have when a TDS is required. This is gonna be for most transactions where a TDS is required. And this is, a TDS is a transfer disclosure statement. I'll show you guys what it is later. In those, I guess, small instances where a TDS is not required, it's usually when somebody inherited the property. The owner inherited the property just recently and has not lived in the property, I believe, for the last year, 1 or 2 years, I'm not sure. I gotta check that, but they just inherited and they didn't live in the property. So they know nothing about it. So there's an exempt seller disclosure that they would have to fill out or answer questions for instead of the transfer disclosure statement. So that's the difference between the two checklists. The main difference, right? So most transactions, like I said, require the TDS. So we're gonna use this checklist. This is the one that we commonly use. And so let's say you guys are representing the buyer. So if you're representing the buyer, I guess it doesn't matter if you're representing the seller or the buyer, you're still gonna have to come up with all these forms or upload all these forms. So the first form on the checklist here is the affiliated business arrangement disclosure statement. And this form, I'm gonna show you an example of what each form looks like as well.
Can you give us like a quick summary of what?
Yeah,
each form
yeah.
is?
So this form pretty much says that the brokers that you're affiliated with, Coldwell Banker Properties, has an affiliation with these other companies here. And we're disclosing it, we're not hiding anything, just to let you know that our escrow, belongs to the owners here and so forth. But this is to let everybody know, so everybody's gonna sign this. And then, let's go to the next page here. So that's what that is, and that is gonna be provided by whichever side you're representing. So if you're representing the buy side, you're gonna need it. If you're representing the list side, you're gonna need it. So this can be provided by either party, but you need to have that. You need to provide that to let them know, let the other party know. So on this one, you can check mark either or, maybe write a note, just say that we always need this. Any questions on that one? Okay, so the next one is, on the list is the buyer representation agreement. And that one, is a packet also, right? So you guys know what that is, because we've been talking about that the last probably 3 months. And this is a representation agreement for, between you and your buyers, saying that they're gonna pay you a commission, and you're representing them for 3 months or less. And where you're going to, look for properties for them, research for properties for them, so forth. This is what that looks like. And along with it, you have the agency disclosure. So there's that, there's the buyer representation, broker compensation agreement. And that also includes, it's a packet, buyer investigation advisory. Pretty much telling the buyer, you're strongly advised to investigate the condition of the property and so forth, right? Because, so later on, they'll come back and say, well, you didn't tell me I can investigate the property. Well, here it is. We're recommending that you investigate the property to meet your satisfaction. Broker compensation advisory. This is part of the same packet, and it's telling them that the commission is negotiable and so forth. And then if you go to the next page on here, and there's more in there, but also the changes, I think on the second page, talks about the changes in the practice related to the brokers offering compensation to the buyer's agent. But this is included on the packet for the listing agreement, but it's also included in the packet for the buyer representation agreement, letting everybody know, hey, Mr. Buyer, Mrs. Buyer, you are now responsible for paying your own commission. You can negotiate that along with your offer. And it's also telling the listing, the seller on the listing contract, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, you're responsible for paying commission to your agent. And this is how the law used to be, where, not law, but this is how the practice used to be, where you would also offer a compensation to the buyer's agent, but that's no longer the case. So that explains everything. Any questions on that? Does that make sense? Okay. If you guys get confused with anything I'm saying, let me know, because I might be confusing you guys. So another form within the same packet is a possible representation of more than one buyer or seller. It's pretty much what that is, letting your buyer or your client know that you might be working with multiple buyers, multiple sellers. You might be working with the buyer and the seller of that same property, and just letting them know you're not my only client. You might not be my only client.
On the same property.
It could be the same property, it could be other properties, it could be any property, but that they might not be your only client.
Okay.
In case someone thinks like, you're not calling me back, I texted you, I left you a message 10 minutes ago, and you're not calling back. It's like, sorry, I was at a walkthrough for another client,
So a quick question.
Yeah.
Like, say you're showing the buyer a house, right?
Yes,
And you see the house and you're like, oh, this is a nice house, I have somebody else. So that person that you're showing the house says, no, I don't like it, it's not me. So basically you're saying, well, I'm gonna show it to somebody else. So if you don't get it, somebody else is gonna see it that I think might like it.
well, someone else is gonna, yeah, there's other agents with clients too, so other people are gonna see it anyway.
Right, or you might have somebody
Yeah.
else at the.
You don't
same
have to
time.
tell them that.
Yeah.
I
but
mean, they should already know that you might have other buyers. So you might show the same property to 2 or 3 different buyers. Right?
So like if they don't grab it, somebody else might.
Yeah.
Hopefully they don't get mad at you.
Yeah. So another form that's still in the same packet is the California Consumer Privacy Act Advisory and Disclosure Notice. So this is pretty much saying, when we enter, we're not sharing your information with anybody, making it public, but there are some parties that are going to get your information, maybe just your name, address, things like that. And it could be the MLS. It could be, you know, shared with another brokerage or whatever. But we're not selling your information or anything like that. So just want to let you know that, your information will be out there within a few parties. It's not anything that you need to worry about. And then their rights, right? There's a CCPA. Okay, so now let's go. Those were all the forms within that buyer representation agreement. So now we are to the agent visual inspection. Oh, and who's gonna provide that? The buyer side. Okay, so the next one is the agent visual inspection disclosure. This one is gonna be provided, each agent needs to provide their own AVID. Is what we call this one. And that's exactly what it is. It's a visual inspection of the property. You don't have to go in and it's visual, so visual inspection. So you don't have to go through and start flipping on all the lights and off and on and opening all the faucets and checking the showers. You don't have to do any of that stuff. You're just gonna look, walk into the property. If you see a broken window in the main bedroom, master bedroom, you're gonna write broken window, master bedroom. If you see a torn carpet, it's what you see, torn carpet in the hallway. If you see a torn screen or something, screen is torn in secondary bedroom, whatever, broken tile, things like that. Big hole in the wall. If you see a stain on the ceiling that you think it's a water stain, don't say it's a water stain, just say yellow stain in the ceiling. If you see something that you believe is mold and it's black and it's growing in the bathroom, don't say mold growing in the bathroom because you don't know it's mold, you didn't test it. Just say black discoloration or stain in the ceiling, right, in the bathroom. So these are the things you're gonna write down. So with this form, again, each agent's gonna provide their own, right? So that way you're pretty much saying, I've been to that property, if I'm writing down anything that I think is material defect of the property so that I'm not trying to hide anything or you know, maybe I took the buyer through the property and I'm like, I looked at this bedroom, oh, I don't want them to see this bedroom. It's all, you know, it needs a lot of work. Let's go over here. No, you have to write down everything that's in the property, right? That you noticed. So,
Does this have to be done with the buyer?
No.
So you just.
yeah,
an
you
agent,
can do it, yeah, you
walk
can do it
through
on your own, you can do it while the buyer's there, but you don't want to do it in front of the buyer. You also don't want to do it when you bring the inspector over, if there's gonna be an inspection, because now you're gonna know everything that they're seeing, and they're gonna tell you, oh, hey, look at this, I'm like, no, I don't, I wanna see what I see and that's it.
Mhm.
So, when you're going through this form, make sure that, if there's nothing, no defects or anything, just say no material defects noted. Instead of leaving it blank. Because when you leave it blank, it makes it look like you didn't go through the house. Like, you're just like, oh, what do I remember about this room? Oh, okay, there's nothing wrong with that, I'll just leave it blank. You wanna make sure that you write something in there, so no material defects noted. And again, each agent is gonna provide one of those.
You also do the outside.
Yes, yeah, and so on the form, it shows. You notice that there's like the entrance, there's the
Okay.
garage, exterior of the building, the yard, front, sides, back. Yeah, good question. The next form, we have miscellaneous on here, on the checklist, and miscellaneous is for when you're in a transaction with an agent from a different brokerage, and sometimes they have their own disclosures that they require that they have signed. So you're just gonna put all those forms in there after everything's signed. Okay, California purchase agreement.
What is the asterisk mean?
Oh, good question. So when there's an asterisk next to one of these items on the checklist, it means if applicable. So you're not every form on here is gonna be required. Thank you for bringing that up, Christine. There's some things that are not required, but are only required if, and then there's a little explanation next to it. And we'll look at one of those, as we move forward here, but the next form on the checklist is the purchase agreement. And the purchase agreement consists of a bunch of different forms in the packet. So again, this is the agency disclosure saying what the duty is for each party, the buyer's agent, listing agent, and for the buyer and seller themselves, and who you're representing. And then this is the purchase contract. Purchase contract is your offer, pretty much. And it goes over the terms of what the offer is gonna be, what the purchase price is, how long the escrow is gonna be, contingency periods, who pays for what as far as escrow, title, home warranty, things like that. So this is what it looks like. Let's go through the pages here. And then at some date forward, moving forward here, we'll have a class on this. Richard will do the class on this. Try to have it at least once a month.
So let's say standard, escrow period is 30 days.
Yes.
If the buyer wants 40 days, this is where we put it down.
Yeah, there's no specific date written in here.
Okay,
There's a space for you to write a date, a number of days.
okay. So whether the seller wants to cooperate.
Everything's a negotiation. Yeah, so you could say, I want 60-day escrow, and then the seller might say, we'll do 45. And then they counter you with 45 days, and then you guys come to an agreement. But typically, people are writing in 30 days, and then that's what the duration of escrow is. 30 days or sooner sometimes. So they might say 30 days, but maybe I'm representing a buyer that we want to make it a 30-day escrow, but we might be able to close in 21 days, but we're gonna write it in 30. So I'll do 30 or sooner. I'll contact the listing agent, say, hey, so we might be able to close sooner. Do you think your seller's okay with that? They're like, yeah, they already moved out. So yeah, whenever they're ready, let's close. So we might be on day 21, 22, and then my buyer says, hey, let's close. Reach out to the listing agent, hey, are we good to close? Yeah, okay, let's go, let's do it. So you close. So as long as everybody agrees to it, you can do it. So within the purchase agreement, there's other forms as well, and the buyer investigation advisory, we went over this already. And this is pretty much telling the buyer, hey, you should definitely investigate the property, do inspections and so forth. And here's some of the things, like make sure that the square footage is correct, condition of the property, maybe do a termite inspection. If it's on a side of a hill, check the soil, stability of it, things like that, right? And so forth. You can take a look at this form. Again, the possible representation more than one buyer seller. So you're telling the buyer, again, like we said before, you might not be my only buyer or seller that I'm working with. Fair housing and discrimination advisory. This is pretty much saying that equal access to housing for all. We're not discriminating. Anybody can buy a house as long as you qualify and so forth, right? It's not, there's and the laws associated with that, just so that they know you're not discriminating.
I'm sorry, Carlos. The inspection, you inform the buyer to do the investigation yourself. Who would do that?
You can recommend, if they don't already have their own inspection company, you can recommend.
So inspector, right?
And then well, I'll show you an example of an inspection a little bit later. But here, let's go through buyer homeowners insurance advisory. This is it's terrible right now, because fires. It's letting the homeowner know they're gonna need to have homeowners insurance. And
Is it gonna happen?
it's just, and not in some areas. A wire fraud and electronic funds transfer advisory, this is pretty much making your buyer aware to be safe when wiring money over, because there's a lot of fraud that occurs. And when they send over the security deposit, I'm sorry, their earnest money deposit, that's when the fraud usually occurs. There's an intercept between the buyer and escrow, and that's where they end up swooping in and emailing the buyer the wire instructions. Hey, here's the wire instructions for your escrow. Send your deposit here. And then the buyer's like, okay, they send it. And then escrow then emails the buyer, hey, we're still waiting for your deposit. What's going on? Well, I sent it to you. No, you didn't. Well, I sent it to somebody, and then guess what? The money's gone. So when they're wiring over the earnest money deposit, or they get escrow instructions or wire instructions from escrow, this is what you should do. As soon as you open escrow, let your buyer know, hey, you're gonna be getting an email from escrow with escrow instructions, or wire instructions. They might ask you some questions. When they send over the wire instructions, make sure you call escrow and you confirm with them, hey, is this over the phone, is this the routing number? Are these the correct account numbers or whatever it is? Before you send them, because you can lose it. Let's go to the next one here. We went over this, the Privacy Act. We're not sharing it with anybody. There might be a couple, the MLS, things like that, the other party in the transaction. Okay, so that was that. Closing statement. Closing statement. Oh, on the purchase contract, who's gonna provide that? The buyers,
The buyer.
buy side or the sell side? Okay, so it's the buy side, so check mark buy side. The next one is the closing statement. Closing statement looks like. Looks like this. This is that close of escrow. You're gonna get this from escrow, so check the escrow box. This is showing your client where all the money went for the purchase.
What is that, the closing statement?
Yeah, it's also known as the final settlement statement. So what we're looking for is the one that looks like this, because there's another document called the closing statement that looks different. This is the one that we're looking for. Some call it closing statement, but most of them call it a final settlement statement. So on our checklist, we have it as a closing statement, yeah. Okay, so let's go back to the checklist. And again, escrow is gonna provide that. The next item on the checklist is condo, HOA, or other common interest development docs. I don't have an example of that, but you're gonna get this from escrow. And this is if there's an HOA involved. What we need is, there's a acknowledgement of receipt form that escrow is gonna send out to the buyer, that the buyer signs, that they acknowledge that they received the HOA docs. That's pretty much what we need, just that form signed by the buyer, saying that they received it. So that's what you're gonna upload into the checklist. The next form is the contingency removal form. And that one looks like this. Sometimes there's gonna be a seller contingency, if the seller, I don't wanna confuse you guys. So I'll just kind of touch on it real quick. If the sale of property is contingent on the seller finding a replacement property, there could be a contingency there. So you don't find that as often, but you're starting to see it. But this is the buyer contingency, so you have the 17 days to remove all your contingencies as a buyer. Or if you reduce the number of days, whatever that is. And this is where you can remove, so this is gonna be buyer contingency form removal number 1. So you're gonna type in number 1 here. And sometimes someone will just remove all the contingencies and just check box number 4 here. Our buyer hereby removes all contingencies. Or maybe they're gonna remove a few contingencies at a time. Maybe they're gonna remove their investigation contingency or the prelim contingency or whatever. So every time you submit, if you're on the buy side, by the way, this is provided by the buy side. You might have only 1 contingency removal, or you might have 6. So every time you submit one, removing a new contingency, it's gonna be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever it is, right? But if there's 1, then you're just gonna type in 1 and then remove all contingencies. So buyer hereby removes any and all buyer contingencies. And then the buyer signs it. All right, so the next form on the checklist is the earthquake hazard report booklet, signature page. And if you look at the asterisks here, it's if applicable. So if the home was built pre-1960. So here's the explanation, right? And all we require is a signature page. So what you're gonna have to do is send your buyer or the client a booklet. And that's the name of it, the earthquake hazards report. I don't know if that's the booklet. There's a, I don't have the name of it. It's under EPUBs in the form library. There's a couple different ones, but there's a signature page for this, and this is what that page looks like.
Perhaps.
Yeah, there's the different form libraries, we talked about that last week.
Mhm.
And it's within the EPUB library, form library. So this is what it looks like here. And this should be provided by the list side,
The earthquake hazard provided by the list side?
yes. The next line item is escrow instructions and earnest money deposit receipt and amendments. Provided by escrow. And that looks like escrow instructions, that's what that looks like. And it could be like a bunch of pages, right? It's gonna be a bunch of pages. And then the earnest money deposit receipt that shows that they received the earnest money deposit receipt. And you're gonna get that from escrow. The next form on here is the fire hardening defensible space advisory. And this is if applicable, if the property is in a high fire zone. And that's,
It's by the listing side.
yeah, listing side, yes. Okay, and the next, oh, let me go back. The next form on the checklist is the homeowner's guide to earthquake safety and environmental hazards, signature page. And that's what it's called within zip forms, it's the signature page, and it's under the EPUB library. And this should be provided by the list side. And there's a booklet, I think the booklet that you send has all of this, it has the earthquake hazards. And safety environment, it's all the same. But there's one that has a few different booklets in it. And this one is required for all homes, all sales. This one up here is pre-1960. If the property is built pre-1960, you need both of these. If it was built after 1960, then you only need this one here. And this is what the page looks like. It's pretty much just a signature page for buyer and seller to sign. And again, the list side is gonna provide that. The next form on the checklist is the lead-based paint. And this one, if applicable, if it's built pre-1978. And this form, provided by the list side, looks like this. It's just letting know that that properties built prior to 1978, the paint contained lead in it, and that you're not responsible for, but everybody, all the homes had it, so. Market conditions advisory, this is should be provided by the list side. And this is what it looks like. So it's pretty much saying that the markets fluctuate and everything, you're responsible for determining the purchase price. You guys can read through it, but it's just telling them about the market pretty much dictates the price. Unless you're gonna offer way more or way less or whatever it is, but. Let's see, a mold disclosure. This one, we want you, if you're representing the buyer, we want you to have this. You should get it anyway, if you're representing the buyer or the seller. And this is our company form. And that looks like this. And only the buyer signs this one. But we want it for all transactions. So whether you're representing the buyer or the seller, we want you to still have the buyer sign this. Put it into the checklist. The next form is Orange County disclosures. If the property's in LA, a lot of LA doesn't have LA disclosures. Riverside, San Bernardino counties, there's some areas that have them, but Orange County has it. So if the property is located in Orange County, their area disclosures, and the area disclosures pretty much tells you, this is what it looks like. It's pretty much saying, transportation corridors, there's toll roads, there's, airports, there's armed forces bases training, there's landfills. Pretty much anything that's going on here in Orange County that could affect them, you're letting them know about. And,
that's
prisons and all that stuff, right?
Fire zone.
This one, the list side should provide it. On some of these guys, if the listing side doesn't provide it, and it requires a signature only, just go ahead and send it to your buyer to sign it. You can find it as a form, just have them sign it and then send it to the listing agent and have their seller sign it. Instead of like asking them, and hey, can you send this, send this, I'm missing these forms. Just download it, have your buyer sign it, and send it to them, and have them sign it.
What is the name of the document?
Orange County disclosures.
So,
So is that like a Coldwell Banker thing?
No, this one you can find on the Orange County Realtors Forum Library within zip files. Okay. So next on the list, NEC report. So the NEC report should be provided by the list side. And that looks like this. An example of one. And just so you guys can see what it includes is it in a flood area? Is it in a high fire zone? Things like that. So that's gonna be provided by the listing side. The next thing on the checklist is the physical inspection report or buyer inspection waiver. So if you're representing the seller and the buyer is waiving, they don't want to do inspection, fine, you don't have to upload anything on here. If you're representing the buyer and the buyer says, I don't want to do inspection, then you want to get the buyer inspection waiver. Okay, so that's like, you not only told them, hey, we advise that you get inspections done with the inspection advisory form, but now with this form of the buyer inspection waiver, we're doubling down and say, hey, we told you that you should probably get inspection, but now you're saying you definitely don't want to get one. So sign here saying that you don't, and you don't want to get one. And this protects us, protects brokerage.
That's advice.
Yeah. So you're gonna either upload the copy of the inspection report or the buyer inspection waiver. And here's here's an example of an inspection report. And they go through the whole house and they're gonna have a lot of recommendations as to what needs to be done to the property. It's gonna be pictures,
Required to upload this?
either this or the buyer inspection waiver. If you're having an inspection, upload the inspection report. If there's no inspection, then upload the buyer inspection waiver. And I'll show you what that looks like. I have it a little bit later down in the slides. But that's an example of one. So this is gonna be provided by the buy side because usually the buyer's gonna order the inspection and you're gonna get this from the buy side. The next thing on the checklist is the preliminary title report, also known as a prelim. This is provided by title, but we're gonna get it through escrow. And this is an example of what one looks like. And this is gonna talk about like chain of title, if there's any liens on the property, easements, a variety of different things, but this is what an example of one looks like. All right, so again, you're gonna get this from escrow. The next item on the checklist is proof of funds and pre-approval letter. So if you're representing the buyer or you, then you're gonna have your proof of funds, like bank statement, your pre-approval letter from the lender, and your offer, your purchase contract. And you're gonna submit that. So buy side should provide this. You're gonna get this from your buyer if you're representing the buyer. But if you're on the listing side, you're gonna have this anyway because they're submitting these things to you. So if you're on the list side and you're missing this, reach out to the buyer's agent and say, hey, can you send me this stuff? You never sent it over. But if you're representing the buyer, you should already have this. So the buy side should be providing this. Next one is proof of home warranty or waiver. So you're either gonna have a home warranty. Here's an example of what one looks like. It's just an order of a home warranty. Or you're gonna have the home warranty waived, which on the purchase contract, there's a section that you're gonna check the box that says that the buyer waives the home warranty. So it's either or, either they're gonna waive it on the purchase contract, or they're gonna ask for a credit for a home warranty in the contract. And you're gonna get a home warranty, and this is an example of what the home warranty order confirmation looks like.
You don't have to have it, you can waive it.
Yeah, but so some people do that as a strategy, like, if I want my offer to be accepted, I'm gonna say, you don't have to pay for termite inspection, you don't have to pay for a home warranty. I'm gonna reduce all my contingency dates to 10 days, I'm gonna do 21-day escrow. Now my offer looks better than everybody else's, right? And I'm offering a little bit more than what everyone else is. So that could be a strategy where we're not asking anything for anything. And we wanna close soon, and I'm all cash, so that might make it look a little more attractive, right?
So home warranty is supposed to be paid by the listing.
It's not
By the
supposed to
seller.
be paid, it can be paid by either side, but traditionally, you ask the seller to pay for it. And you ask the seller for a credit of $850 to $1,000 towards a home warranty. And the home warranty can cost anywhere around that much, and includes certain things, right? So. And this is gonna be provided by, if you're representing the buyer, the agent should, reach out to the home warranty company and have them contact your buyer. And let them know, hey, this is how much credit we got from the seller for the home warranty. Can you call my buyer and tell them what their options are? And how to use this money. Sometimes some escrow companies will just order it. And then when they do, sometimes the buyers get mad, they're like, oh, you just picked the home warranty for me. So if you're representing the buyer, I recommend that you reach out to the home warranty company again. Say, hey, here's my buyer, does it contact, can you call them and tell them what their options are? This is how much credit they're getting. So this should be provided by the buy side. And then, if you're on the listing side and you need a copy of this, you can just get it from escrow, because escrow is gonna get a copy of this too. So worst case scenario, escrow is gonna have a copy of this, but you have to make sure if you're on the buy side, you order this. So the next thing is the real estate transfer disclosure statement. So this is also known as the TDS. And the TDS is gonna be provided by the list side. And the TDS is a questionnaire, pretty much asking information about the property. And so, let's see here. Items included, septic tank, rain gutters, washer dryer hookups, things like that, like, so the seller's gonna check mark whatever applies. And then there's questions about the property. Only the seller would know, right? So they have to answer these questions. So the listing side is gonna provide this. And all of these forms need to be signed by the buyer and the seller. So the next form on here is representative capacity signature disclosure. This is if applicable. This is if the property is owned by an entity, it could be a trust, LLC, corporation. So let me show you what the form looks like. So most likely, you're gonna get this from the listing side. But there's an RCSD for the seller, there's an RCSD for the buyer. There's even an RCSD for a tenant and one for the landlord. So if the seller is a trust or an LLC, you're gonna have to fill this out. So you would get this from the listing side. If the buyer's buying from as a trust or LLC, then you're gonna need to do the buyer side. So most likely, let's just say list side for now for your checklist here. And then they're gonna write in the name of the trust, so they're gonna check mark trust here. They're gonna write the name of the trust, and then at the bottom here, they're gonna write. Pass it. Who the signers are. And what their title is. So it could be a trust, and then Carlos Rodriguez, I'm a trustee of that trust. So this is letting them know that I'm signing as a trustee on behalf of the trust, because you can't sign the name of the trust. So you have to have a person's name.
Usually
Right.
the owner.
Well, whoever the trustee is of the trust. So maybe the owner's not the trustee, maybe it's somebody else. So on the contract, the seller is the trust. So you're gonna see the trust name as the seller everywhere. But the signer is going to be me as the seller.
Because you're in the trust.
Because I'm the trustee of the trust, yeah, and I have the trust, I have to provide a copy of it to escrow and I believe title and just to confirm everything, right?
And that's only if it's in a trust, otherwise you don't need it.
Or an LLC or a corporation, or.
Can you explain the difference between trust and LLC?
LLC is more like a business or treated like a business or company. And a trust is more like something you do for a family, like, good morning. Is more like for like, you know, you're gonna put your property in a trust to, and it protects you from someone going after your asset, your home. So like if the property's under your name, someone sues you, they can go after your house. But if you put your property in a trust and someone sues you, they can't go after your house because the trust owns it, you don't own it. Right, so that's when you're gonna need a trust.
Should everybody do that?
Yeah, yeah.
Then why don't you put it in a trust versus the LLC?
LLC is more like if it's a business, so a lot of rentals are put in LLCs and they keep them separate for business purposes. Just to separate and, you know, separately. So this is when you're gonna need the RCSD. And you're not always gonna need this because even if it's in a trust or an LLC, the purchase contract has a section built into it now that you can write that information into it. So you won't need this if that's already filled out. All right, so the next one is request for repairs. There's a request for repairs and response to request for repairs. I only uploaded the request for repairs, not the other one. So this is what the request for repairs looks like. And this is gonna be provided by the buyer or the buy side. And this is if, after you do the inspection, the buyer is gonna request any work to be done or any credits towards the repairs. So there's some options there, right? You know, if you're representing the buyer, they might ask you, hey, first thing they're gonna do is, what do you think I should ask for in this report? You're buying this house, man, it's up to you, what do you want them to fix? Definitely nothing cosmetic, because, you know, there's some buyers that get out of hand, they're like, I want you to put I want a new door, I want you to paint the inside, I want new shrubs outside, I want, like, no, that's not what this is for. Is there, do you want a new AC? You want the AC replaced? Do you want the roof fixed? There's a leak, get the leak fixed before close of escrow, things like that. You can ask for that here, and it's gonna be under section 1 here. Check mark the box A here, next to A, and then write in what you want. And so if you have an inspection report, you can write what section in that report you're asking them to fix. So section, 5 in the report, we would want you to repair this or replace this or whatever it is. And then down here at the bottom, you're gonna say, check mark attached report, so number 2. You're gonna check the box and write in the report. And when it was dated and so forth, so that way they know exactly what report you're referring to, what section within that report. Or you can ask for a credit, or you can ask for a combination of both. We want you to fix these things, but we also want $5,000 credit towards other repairs. And so, again, this is a negotiation, so you're asking for it, and the seller doesn't have to agree to it. They could just say, okay, seller agrees to it, and they sign it. Or they say seller agrees, does not agree. Seller is gonna give a partial credit. Let's see, what else are we looking at here? Yeah, sellers not agree down here. So, or they could just say, you know what, we're not gonna do any of the repairs that you're asking for, but we're gonna give you a couple $1,000. So they can respond with that. Or the seller could just say, we're gonna respond to you with the seller's response to request for repairs. And that's another form that says, they're gonna spell out, we're gonna fix this, and they have a list of what they're gonna do. And then the buyer can either agree to it or not, but usually it doesn't go past this. Unless the buyer's asking for a lot. The buyer's asking for a lot, then you're gonna have the seller's response to request for repairs. But this is what the form looks like. And this is provided by the buy side.
At what point do you present that? Agreement? That form.
After your inspection. Cause you need to know what needs to be fixed, right?
Yeah.
So, if you guys remember when we talked about working with the buyer in the purchase process, you want to do the inspection, schedule it as soon as possible, as soon as you open escrow, just so you can get that out of the way. And then look for, talk about or discuss what you want repaired, or if you want a credit towards something. So you want to get that as soon as possible, so your negotiation window is open, because you need to remove your contingencies after 17 days. So the sooner you get that report, the sooner you request your repairs, the more time you're gonna have to negotiate, because if you send your request for repairs on day 16, but you have to remove contingencies on day 17, you're not, like, time's not on your side. You're gonna have to remove contingencies, and you don't have time to negotiate. So do you want to move forward without the repair, without knowing if they're gonna repair anything? Because you're gonna send your request, and they're gonna say, hey, you gotta remove contingencies. And you remove them, and then now the seller says, oh, we're not gonna fix it. Sorry. So you want to get that done as soon as possible, upfront. All right, so the next form on here is this seller property questionnaire. This is provided by the list side. And this is what that looks like. It's another questionnaire. Questionnaire about the property. Is there a death in the property in the last 3 years? So it's more questions about the property. And so they're gonna answer all these. And again, you're gonna get it from the list side. Everyone should sign, buyer or seller. This one's 4 pages as opposed to the 3 pages on the TDS. And they look at this and they're like, oh my God, we're gonna answer all those questions. Like, compared to all the forms that you have to sign, these 2 forms that you have to answer questions for is nothing. Because they have to go through so much. And these are like the only 2 they have to actually answer questions for. All right,
When do you
So-
provide that?
I'm sorry.
When do you provide that?
You provide that, the seller should provide that within the first 7 days of the transaction. Actually, since you haven't been here before, they have, here's this. You can have this transaction timeline that shows you when everything's due. You guys should all have one of these, right? Yes, okay. So yeah, the list that is gonna provide that. Let's go to the next one here. So right now, on the checklist, we're just talking about, on this checklist, who's gonna provide what? So when you're in a transaction and you're missing something, you know, oh, I'm missing this, who am I gonna get this from? The listing side, okay, or I'm gonna get this from escrow, so you just send them an email, they send it to you.
Okay.
It was the seller's affidavit non-form status. This is provided by the listing side. And this is what that form looks like. And each seller should fill one of these out, and this is for tax purposes. So if you have husband and wife or partners or whatever, there should be one, like one of their names here, and then they both sign an initial. And then for the other one, you should do the same thing, another one for the second person.
Quick question.
Yes,
Is that print together with the, when is the affidavit print? Separately? I mean.
it's a separate form, yeah.
It is, okay.
So when you download it into your transaction zip forms, you can add it multiple times.
Oh, okay.
So I think that they might have up to 4 of them. So affidavit non first status 1, 2, 3, 4, but you don't have to number them. It's just whatever the person's name is, and this is for tax purposes to make sure that that they're gonna pay the property taxes or the tax on the property. And it's not like a entity from outside the country that they're gonna get away with not paying taxes, right? So that's what this is.
You say for husband and wife.
The
have
list
to
side
fill out-
provides that.
You say husband and wife have to fill out.
Each one, yeah, separately, but they both sign both of them. All right, so the next form on the checklist. Solar advisory and questionnaire, and this is if applicable, if there's solar panels. And this is gonna be provided by the list side because it's, yeah. Just letting them know about solar ownership. I mean, you guys can read through this, if there's liens involved possibly, or leases, or if they bought them or leased them or. So. Questionnaire on it. But this is provided by the list side. The next one is a statewide buyer and seller advisory. This is provided by the list site as well. Again, this is one of those forms that if the listing agent didn't send it to you, just have your buyer sign it and send it to them and have the seller sign it. It's just reading. And they just sign at the end of it. And this is what it looks like. I think it's like 16 pages. Seller rights and duties, broker rights and duties, table of contents of what everything means. Yeah, it's like a glossary pretty much of everything real estate related. Would describe pest, it just describes everything having to do with transaction. It's like a dictionary or something. Legal requirements, for sellers, buyers. Oh, let me go back. So then buyer and sellers both sign. Yeah. The next one on the checklist is the termite inspection report and clearance or waiver. So if you're gonna get a termite inspection report and they're gonna do work on it, you have to get a clearance or completion of work is what the form is. You're gonna upload a copy of the termite inspection, and typically the seller is going to pay for this because the buyer is asking them to pay for it in the contract. So the seller would provide this, so the list site would provide it. And if they're gonna do an inspection, they're probably gonna do a clearance, so you're gonna get them to do the clearance or completion of work. But if they don't want one, then if you're representing the buyer, then you're gonna do the buyer inspection waiver. The one I talked about, if they don't want a physical inspection, this is what that looks like.
Do you highly recommend that someone gets and that everybody gets a termite inspection? Or when?
Yeah, we recommend that they get as many reports as possible on the property. Now it's up to them. Standard is gonna be a physical inspection, just an inspection of the whole property, and then termite inspection. If it's like a new home, probably wouldn't get a termite inspection, right? But you would then have them sign this. So this is the buyer inspection waiver. It's pretty much telling them, hey, we recommend that you get an inspection, but by signing this, you're saying that you understand and you don't want one. So under 3A, this is them waiving, they have to initial here, waiving the home inspection. And then 3B is waiving the termite inspection. So if they're waiving both inspections, they're gonna initial in both spots here. But they're also gonna sign at the bottom of this.
You say the list side. You have to provide this.
No, this is the buy side. If the buyer elects not to get a physical inspection or a termite inspection, they're gonna initial on either or both, and then sign at the bottom. So we need either the termite inspection or we need the termite inspection waiver, one or the other. And the termite inspection is usually gonna be provided by the seller, but if the buyer elects not to get one, then they're gonna provide the buyer inspection waiver. Okay, so the next one is the trust advisory. This is provided by usually the seller if the property is in a trust. And it's just telling them that even if they're in a trust, they still have to comply with all the same rules and everything having to do with an individual selling a property. And then it's signed by the seller and the buyer. And this should be provided by the seller. So the list side, and it's if applicable, see the asterisk there? That means if applicable, so if the property's in a trust, then we need that. But if it's not, then you don't. And in SkySlope, in the system, when you upload this, there's certain things that are required, and the ones that show the little asterisk, it's not required. But if it is, you just upload it. So as I'm going to the checklist and checking all the documents that you guys upload, everything that's required, you have to upload to the checklist. All right, so the next thing on here again is miscellaneous, and we have it split up into sections. So that's another miscellaneous there. We won't worry about that. Verification of property condition, this is also known as the final walkthrough. And this is gonna be provided by the buyer. Where is it? Did it not include it? It's not in here. Okay, so it's not in here, but that form is pretty much just saying you're doing a final walkthrough, and there's a few lines that are blank that it allows you to write in if there's something that wasn't fixed, or maybe something that wasn't there before that you noticed, like, hey, there's a hole in the wall that wasn't there before. Otherwise, it's just your buyer signing it saying, hey, the property is in the condition that we agreed to when I purchased it. and all the repairs that we agreed to were made. So then the buyer signs it, you send it to the listing side, the seller signs it, and then you add it to your transaction. So this is gonna be provided by the buy side. The next form on here is the water constraint flame fixture and carbon monoxide detector form. And this is gonna be provided by the list side. And this is just telling them what the requirements are for plumbing fixtures and carbon monoxide and everything. It's not saying, I understand it and I've complied with everything. It's just saying, hey, we understand what the requirements are. And the seller's gonna provide this, and everyone's gonna sign, buyer and seller. And this will go into your checklist. And let's see, we're almost done here. And then these other ones are, if applicable, notice the buyer to perform, notice the seller to perform. I think I have the notice the buyer to perform. This is more likely what you're gonna see. And you remember how we talked about removing contingencies? And so if you have to remove contingencies on the 17th day, the seller can send a notice to buyer to perform on the 15th day, so 2 days prior to that performance of that is due. So if I'm the listing agent and I want to send over a notice to buyer to perform to remove all contingencies, I'm going to check all contingencies right there on I, or number 1, check mark all contingencies. I'm going to have my seller sign it and I'm going to send it to the buyer side. Now that tells them, hey, if you don't remove contingencies by 2 days, within 2 days, on the 3rd day, we can cancel, the seller can cancel. And this is one of the only ways the seller can cancel. Remember, the buyer can cancel for any reason until they remove contingencies, for any reason, but the seller cannot. This is how the seller can get out of it. So I like to, when I'm representing a seller, I like to make sure to send this because it gives them an out if they want one. But a lot of people don't send it because it freaks the buyers out. And are they, so is the seller trying to cancel? No, I'm just protecting my seller. And I tell them, this is company policy. We just do this to protect the seller. You know? But if you do send one of these out, let the other agent know in advance, hey, I'm gonna send you a notice to perform, don't freak out. It's just company policy. Because if you don't tell them that, they're gonna like just flip on you. So let them know ahead of time.
And what if they don't remove contingencies?
Then the contingencies live on. Unless the seller cancels. So the seller can cancel after the 3rd day. Or they could just say, oh, well, they didn't remove them, they called our bluff.
Yeah.
We're not gonna cancel, so okay, let's just, I told you guys before, I was in a transaction where they never removed contingencies. And I sent them so many notice to performs. At the end, I was just like, oh, God, we're gonna close like tomorrow. And they haven't even removed contingencies. I'm like, they can still cancel tomorrow. But they closed. I mean, I was stressed the whole time thinking like, they're gonna cancel, but they closed. So you don't have to remove contingencies for it to close. So if on the checklist, you're just gonna say not applicable. They never provided one.
So they're doing the same thing to you that you're doing to them, basically, right? Because you're like freaking them out by saying, sign the contingency to remove, and if they don't, they're like, okay, well, I can back out anytime up until the last day.
Yeah.
So they're playing the same game on.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
So if any of these forms, if the other side of the transaction, the other party, if you're the buyer, if you're the buyer's agent, and you're emailing the listing site, hey, can you send me these documents? You still don't have them, and they never send them, and the transaction closes. On the checklist, when in SkySlope, just upload a copy of the email that you sent them requesting it. So that way, we at least have record that you requested it, but they never provided it.
So notice to perform could be provided by both sides.
Yeah, there's a notice to seller to perform also. So like if the seller has the contingency in place to, it's contingent upon the seller finding a replacement property and closing, or just finding a replacement property, then there's a contingency by the seller. And then they say, we're gonna remove contingencies by this day, and they don't remove them. You can send the notice to the seller to perform to remove their contingency. Right, because now you're like at their whim. You're like, hey man, how long is this gonna take? Like you said, by this date, we gotta move on. There's another house that we found, So. And then cancellation,
Notice of what?
notice to seller to perform and notice to buyer to perform. And then there's cancellation of contract. And let's see what that looks like here. Hold on. And this is also if applicable. And this is if you're gonna cancel escrow. So let's say I give them the notice to buyer to perform and they didn't remove contingencies. On the third day, my seller's gonna say, okay, let's cancel. So this is pretty much saying that we're gonna cancel. The seller signs it. And we can send this to escrow and say, we're gonna cancel unilaterally because they didn't remove contingencies.
Now,
Or if you guys agree to cancel both sides, maybe you can't, there's some repairs that the buyer asked for and the seller's like, we're not gonna do it, and the seller's like, okay, we're just gonna cancel. Then the buyer can send this and cancel and get their deposit back, and it's mutual, right? So this is the form that you would use for that.
when it's mutual, do both sides need to fill out this form?
They both need to sign it.
And also, you say third day, is that third working day or just third day?
Well, so the performance cannot land on a weekend. So if the contingency removal. If the day lands, like, let's say it's gonna, the 17th day lands on a Sunday, then it moves it to Monday. Because it can't, the performance day can't be on a weekend
So it's
or holiday, so it would have to be the working day, so. The 17th day would then move to Monday, so then on Tuesday you can cancel. If you give notice to perform. Alright, so any questions on this, any of it? Alright, that's everything there. Let me. Go to Sky, so I don't know if I logged in or not. So skyslope.com is where you're gonna upload all your transactions, right? So when you have a listing, you're gonna log in here and upload a copy of your listing contract so the brokerage can have it. Nope. Oh my God.
We said.
No, because I have it set up on my computer where it's just,
We're not watching,
no.
Just went too fast.
Yeah, I think I went too fast. Is caps on or caps off?
I
don't know.
Read with the keyboard in front of you. I'm just kidding.
I'm looking to see if caps are locked. It doesn't.
Unhide it and then check, just type some random thing that unhide it.
Maybe, maybe log into your username again.
Okay. Stop. All right. Yeah, it doesn't work. I'm gonna have to show you guys later. Well, we've already got an hour anyway,
It's gonna
so.
kick you out now.
So anyway, this is what the checklist looks like anyway. These are all the forms you're gonna have to upload, and when you create a transaction in Skyscope, it's gonna ask you a few questions at the beginning, about the transaction. Who's this, like, who's the buyer, who's the seller, who's the other agent? What's the purchase price, when does escrow close? What's the commission? And then, who the escrow company is. And then it's gonna take you to the checklist after you answer those questions. And then when you see the checklist, you're gonna click on upload next to each one of those, and you're gonna upload the form for that. Whatever item you're uploading. So I recommend, since I can't access that right now, I wanna do something different to show you guys. File organization. When you create a transaction, you should have your files organized like, let's do this. This is what I do. You guys can do whatever you want. And you might have your own filing system where you just have like everything on your desk and you know where everything is. What I like to do is I have a folder, I create a folder. New folder. New folder. So I'm gonna call this folder transactions. Okay. And inside that folder, I'm gonna have all my transactions. So I'm gonna have, let's say I'm working on a transaction right now, so new. This is 123 Main Street.
You live by the address.
Yep. And then I have another one that I'm gonna be working on next week. That is 15 Segway. Okay. And then within Main Street, I'm gonna have any contracts that I have fully executed, I'm gonna save a copy of it here. So that way I keep a copy of everything. And if I ever need to look for anything, like I went to SkySlope and I have to upload these forms, I have everything saved here. So that I can just go through each one and upload each one individually, right? If escrow needs something, hey, can you send me a copy of the purchase contract? I didn't for some reason get it. You can just find it here, saved. But I'll go even one step further is I use Dropbox. Or you can use Google Drive or any of these cloud services. So when I save it here in my Dropbox folder, I create a folder for transactions and everything, then I have it on my phone. So if I go to Dropbox on my phone, Dropbox, and I can go to my transactions and I can access it from here. So if I'm at lunch and escrow calls and hey, I need this, we need this right away, whatever, I can just go on my phone, find it, and just email it directly. You can access it from any computer, any phone, whatever, right? But that's how I organize everything. I have a folder here, so like if it's a listing, I'm gonna save my my CMA here, maybe the flyer that I created for them here. And then once I go in escrow, maybe I create a folder that says fully executed. And then in this folder is where I save all the forms in the transaction that are fully signed. And then on the main section of the folder is where I save the, again, the CMA, maybe, I don't know, something that, some flyers, like I said, some flyers that I created for the listing. But this is just so helpful when you're looking, when you're going through your files and trying to find something. Not just here, but also in your email. So within your email, create folders for each one of your transactions. So any emails you get in regards to that transaction, you're gonna put them into that folder. Because so often I see agents they're looking through their email and they're looking through their inbox for everything and they're going through and they have tons of emails and it's like, if you just move over, you're gonna get emails from escrow, from home warranty, from title, from the other agent, maybe if you have a transaction coordinator, from the inspection company, from the photographer, from all these different people. Just put all those emails into that particular folder you created for that transaction. So that way, if you're looking for something for that transaction, you just go in that folder in your email and you look at those emails. Yes,
So I had things that I downloaded that had like the address with no signatures. Then, so I saved it and then I would send it to the person. So I had that one without the signatures and then I would get it back with that person's signature, not the same for to
so,
the other person to sign it. So I ended up with all these documents.
so, okay, in that case, I would create one that's fully executed, that's only gonna have your fully executed documents. And then just create another folder that says missing, if I'm representing the buyer, missing seller signatures. So when I download them, and then I'm gonna email them to the
They're all
other
in.
agent, I can just go on there and find what I'm missing that needs the seller signature and send it to them, and then when I get it back, then I put it in the other folder.
Okay.
Because when you download them from email, they go to your downloads folder.
Yeah.
And then like from there, you have to upload them to zip forms to get digital signatures and all that. So it all becomes a mess after a while.
Ended up all this.
Any questions on that? Okay, yeah, this is so important, especially when you're starting out, because you don't want to end up like with bad habits of just having to go through everything, so. Or saving everything in your downloads folder and having to look through that. All right, so we're gonna call it quits on that, and then,
Your desktop looks too clean.
yeah, this is just,
Good job, Carlos.
Mine's like, I can't find anything.
what was that? Is that Harriet?
Yeah, hi.
Hi, Harriet.
Oh, anybody interested in buying super lot boxes?
How much are you selling them for?
85. And at the board, they're $125.50. So
Anybody wanna buy a box?
You're super?
Yeah, it's good to have them, because
Yep, I have 3 for sale and just let me know. And Carlos, if you want to just let people know in the office,
Sure.
there are a lot of new agents that probably would rather spend 85 than 125.
Yeah,
How
for
many
sure.
do you have?
Just
3.
Oh, that's nice. So
Think
ours-
about it, let me know, or let Carlos know.
Thanks, Harriet.
Thank
All right, we'll see you
Ooh,
guys
that
next
was
week.
good.
Thank you.
Good job.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.